run a climate tech fund, Climate Systemiq Capital, just across the river. We spun out of Systemiq, which is the world's largest pure-play climate advisory firm, which in turn spun out of McKinsey 6 years ago. I joined 4.5 years ago, and I guess I spent my previous career at Goldman Sachs in power, so I very much come from infrastructure, from power. So we don't do only mobility. We are an impact fund, not an impact fund that we believe that by solving some of the world's biggest problems, you make outsized returns. So we're not an impact fund in the sense of you give up on returns. We invest across food and materials, across transport, climate intelligence, and sort of the software that enables the transition, and then the restoration of climate, which in our language is very much carbon removals and biodiversity restoration. So today we'll talk about the second, the transport. You asked about the BP. That has nothing to do with the...
But it seems to fit in many of the trends. Anyway, you stick to automotive. That's
I'll
fine.
stick to automotive. Then, the BP news is exciting, but that's got nothing to do with cities or in the desert, in fact, or mobility. So our investment thesis around mobility is twofold. Our work very much links to the expertise and the ecosystems at Systemiq, right? So we very much sort of plug founders in these ecosystems we have, which means that we don't look at anything. We're very research-driven, and that's why in mobility we have a particular focus. So it's twofold. On the one hand, we look at so-called hard-to-abate transport sector, which really means shipping, aviation, and trucking. And then on the other hand, we look at cities, and that very much links to the sort of circular mobility side of the story, which is maybe more pertinent to the conversation today. If you look at the big picture, transportation is about 30% of global CO2 emissions. Of that, it's about 50-50 road transportation and everything else. And the road transportation is primarily cars and buses. So trucks are typically considered hard-to-abate sectors. The view to decarbonize that is very clear. If somebody tells you that we're going to have hydrogen cars, you can laugh at them because it's not going to happen. It's going to be electrified, but that doesn't mean that once you electrify all cities, we're necessarily going to have a much better quality of life, right? Yes, pollution will come down, environmental problems will stay, they will delocate it to places where these materials are mined. But if you think about the analogy of Uber and how Uber has made our lives so much easier, but has made the traffic so much worse, it doesn't mean that electrifying and replacing like for like is necessarily going to make cities a better place to live, right? And I would want to believe that when my daughter is my age, owning a personal car in a city will be the equivalent of smoking or eating red meat in my circles, socially unacceptable, right? So if you believe that that's the direction where we're going, then that's going to bring like an entire new revolution with it, where we believe that this 19th century world where you have these old big units that have big speed and can carry lots of cargo to transport very little people and very few things, cars, make no sense, right? It cannot be a one-size-fits-all, because if you just have to go 2 kilometers away, there might be a better means of transport. So equally, we don't believe that the distinction between personal and public transport will stay the way we know it today. All these modes of transport will merge, right? And it's about nodes, whether it's the scooter, the electric bike, the car when you need to, the van, or walk, right? The intermodal, an Uber in the future might look very different to what it is now and really connect you to the nodes, which already happens now, this city to city, but not within city. So I can give you some examples of companies we have invested in so far. So we invest in early stage companies, Series A. So that's sort of the not super early, but when they start having a minimum viable product, and we can help them with the commercialization. So on the hard-to-abate sector, we have invested in a company called ZeroAvia, which is leading in hydrogen aviation. in a company called Nautilus Labs, which leads with the efficiency of ships. And again, ships are going to be very complicated because now they all go on something called heavy sulfur fuel oil. In the future, some will be on hydrogen, some will be on ammonia, some will stay on fuel oil, some will be electric, and it will become very complicated, and it will be very much driven by data. And so Nautilus is sort of an early stage enabler of that. We have a company called Bedeo, which if you see electric Ocado vans around London, they have all been electrified by them. So they build and assemble light commercial vehicles. We have a company called OMI, which is by now the fastest growing EV charging company for residential use in the UK. And then a company called the Routing Company, which is actually, their first client in Europe was Andorra, of all places. And they help. It's the former Uber pool team that failed because Uber's algorithm is built for individual travel, right? But if I want to take a bus so that it's cheaper and you pool a number of people that maybe live in an area that is less densely populated and less serviced by public transport, you can have these little buses or vans that then pool people and take them from point to point, possibly larger in distance than you'd take a sort of urban bus. And yeah, it's a space we are super excited about. Really, each of these, whether you look at shipping, aviation, trucking, and then the cities, it's a very, very different story. The impact story, which is something we care a lot about, how is each investment going to make sort of a better world? That's something that you have to look ahead of investing. The thesis is very different. We've looked at lots of electric bike cars, and so far we have refused to invest because it's very hard to believe that if I subscribe to an electric bike, I'm going to give up on my car. It's usually yet another gadget that I have in my house.
Yeah.
And the data is very non-conclusive yet. But I guess there's lots of these trade-offs in the world of impact, and you really have to think about which nodes, by investing and helping them, are going to accelerate the transition faster. So that's
right.
That's our.
So can I ask you a couple of questions then? So. I think let's go back to the car thing. That's fascinating. You've touched on a phrase I've been working in the last 10 years, I guess, which is the ultimate connected journey from my home to my work and to play and back home is this mobility as a service, right? So the lack of a capital outlay to buy an asset, which is a car, to, as you said, not use very much and often sits around 95% of the time.
So I think the statistics are staggering. 80% of journeys globally are done for less than 2 miles.
Yeah.
The typical occupancy is 1.2 people per car, and I think a typical car is used 4 or 5% of the time. Right?
Yeah.
So in the US, I think that the equivalent of West Virginia is used for parking slots, right? Yeah. So if you imagine how much space we'll gain by getting rid of parking spots because people don't need these cars for 1 hour a day.
Yeah.
And that space can be taken by green, by plain areas or whatever it might be, right?
Yeah.
So the cities have to go in that direction. Obviously, rising temperatures. Today is a good example. This is not normal in London.
Yeah.
There's just no way where a city like this, where there's so little greenery, can survive, right, with rising temperatures. So there's sort of no solution to that.
So mobility as a service, the concept would be, and it's still maybe led by the auto manufacturers who might just have to get in this, and some of them I see are moving that way, where it's not one car that you own forever yourself. It gets more to a community sharing or renting, all kinds of models there. But you skip from train to taxi to car to scooter to wherever it takes, seamlessly, almost with a whistle, but maybe with your phone. And the whole concept of ownership is just different, but the convenience is there. And I guess the only way we'll give up that freedom of ownership is it's so convenient and the price model works, and then we can start to reap the benefits. And it's kind of a shared endeavor of everyone. Is that how you see it, do you think?
I mean, the speaker before is not going to like that, but automated cars are going to be a big picture of that whenever they come. There's all sorts of, eVTOL, if you've heard, electric vertical takeoff and landing, these sort of flying cars, right? Yeah. That's not it's crazy. It's happening, right? There's big investments going into that space, and there's cities. I think Germany is most ahead of that. They are building small helipads around their train stations to enable these vertical cars to sort of take off. But it's going to be a very there will be an Uber function to take a flying car.
Yeah.
It's just going to be very expensive, right? So it is not something for the masses. And
they can experiment in some of those more rural communities, like to do with drone deliveries and what have you.
Drone delivery is going to be huge, right? Right now it's still in its infancy. And I think it's mainly used for medicines delivery, but it's going to become huge, right? That's just no way where... It's also incredibly inefficient, that the idea that you have a diesel car to take like a croissant to somebody 5 kilometers away, right? It doesn't make any sense, right?
Maybe they shouldn't be allowed to get that. There should be rules against that.
Yeah.
Right, I think...
Sorry,
go on.
A quick question. Could you elaborate a bit further on the future of aviation? So are we close to city aviation? So how far are we? Down the line, 2030, can we see...
No, it's not 2030.
So what is that you are looking for when you are funding?
Yeah, not city aviation. We're looking at how you electrify short, mid-haul first, long haul. So I'm going to bore you here, but there's different pathways, right? Short haul is electric, mid-way is hydrogen, long way, there's only one way, which is sustainable aviation fuels.
Yeah.
And you still have, the technology is not set on either of the three, right? So there's plenty of investment opportunities. And again, because you're going to start mixing these different types of fuels, the logistics of an airport will become a lot more complicated, which means that opens a whole set of new spaces for software companies, right? Helping airports to get better at what they do. But it's still in its infancy. Here, talking about 2040.
2040, all right.
And it's definitely true with electric planes. You can imagine getting on an electric boat.
The certification process for a new plane is insanely long, right? If you ever wondered why the audio quality on planes is so bad, it's because just to change the audio of a plane, you have to do the whole certification again, so nobody does it. They keep with stuff old from 20 years ago. It's an industry. Shipping and aviation are some of the hardest with cement, right? They're possibly the 3 hardest sectors to decarbonize out there.
Yeah. But as we wrap, I think, and we're going to touch on this in one of the later speeches, the fact that you're in this area, investing in what's going to help the planet and doing it for economic gain is a good flow.
The best job in the world.
The right money has to go into the right things that humanity needs to endure and survive, right?
But it's also very complex. Climate is a very complex system. So you have to, it takes many years and
hundreds of experiments to find the winning answer. None of us know what the...
Well, nobody knows that, but at least, make sure you invest in things that will make a difference, right? Because there's plenty of things out there, such as carbon offsets or many others, that make no difference, right? So,
Right.
All right.
There's a thought to leave us with. Right, Irena, ladies and gentlemen, thank you very much.